3.5. Half my thumb is still there, and then I've got the index finger is somewhere in finger heaven. And then I got the 3 other fingers left. So that's what I use. And on the right hand, I don't have it anymore. That's how I play guitar.
So you can play only 3-note chords?
Actually 4 if you use the thumb on the top of the neck, kind of the bass, you know. Sometimes 2 notes like that. So that works, but you don't need more. And if you use open tuning, you can play many other things also. I used to play a lot of music. Started out when I was quite young. You know, they put all the kids playing the flute in the beginning, and that was like, okay, I think I got this. What else can I do, you know? So then I started playing the piano, went from that to keyboard, and then my brother started playing the guitar. So I played keyboard and guitar, and then we started playing in a band, and that's how it began. It was quite active, quite a lot of performances. But I was also, I would say I was a seeking individual. I would say I had a good childhood. Great memories, lots of freedom. Growing up in the countryside, in a small village up in the north of Sweden. You know, we had access to nature, could go out fishing, you know, just hanging out with friends, rivers and lakes and forests, all that just outside the door. So that was great. I think I was always a bit, I don't know, I always hurt myself, like I fell, I was climbing somewhere. So yes, I did have that within me since I was very small. Exploring through adventures. That's it, basically. Just do ordinary things. Be good at school. Get yourself a proper education, get a job, earn some money, and be happy. That didn't work for me. So I got bored with life. When I was a teenager, quite early, I started looking for excitement. Never went into drugs, definitely didn't like violence. But when things got dangerous, you know, living on the edge, that was it. Then suddenly I could feel alive. Adrenaline. And then somehow I could manage the mundane things in life. So I did many things, crazy things, you know, driving cars in the night without a driver's license, of course. I was not old enough. 11th of December 1996, an ordinary weekday. I traveled to school from the village where I lived with my family, parents, brothers, 1 sister, and we had been making experiments with explosives. So there at the school, partly it was a boarding school. One of my classmates had a room there in the corridor. Of course, that was perfect because we could make, it was like a lab. A temporary lab. Nothing professional. This was not difficult. We just bought chemicals from the hardware store and the drugstore. And that was it. That's all you needed.
And where did you find the information to build these bombs?
So this was called the Terrorist Handbook. This was early internet, you know, 96. So that was easy. A friend of mine downloaded it and we had it all there. And of course it said, you know, instructions. Warning, be careful. Very sensitive, and so on and so forth. But, you know, when you're 17 or even later in life, you can get into things that obviously are extremely dangerous. But when you're in it, you know, in that moment, in the heat of the moment, you're not thinking about how dangerous it is. You're so focused. You don't necessarily think about, it's like driving your car. Am I going to crash the next second? Because 70, 80 kilometers an hour might kill you. But you don't think about that. So it's all right, I got the seatbelt on. With that approach, I went into this. Kind of thinking like that, you know. It's all right, I got a seatbelt on. In the end, in this room, we were 4 guys. I would say 3 of us were kind of involved. The 4th one just came along. And while moving a part of the mixture into an iron tube from a PET bottle, this whole thing detonated. The greatest part of this mixture was in my right hand. So that's where my right hand just gone. But that was one thing. The other thing is that from the PET bottle, there were like these tiny pieces of burning plastic. That all went into my eyes. So basically I lost most of my vision right in that moment. So that was a dramatic moment in life. So I remember it was completely obvious, what I was totally aware of what happened. My injuries, the bones were sticking out. I was touching it like this, Part of you is in shock, but there's another part that handles it. It enables you to handle these things. They did a pretty good job after. You wouldn't be able to say, this guy had been in an explosion. You can't see that if you look in my face, except the eyes, maybe. I remember that I thought, but wouldn't it have been better if it just blew me completely away? But then I realized that that's not how it is. I'm still here. So I know that people talk about how you go beyond your own abilities. Like you reach something beyond what you think that you're capable of as a human being. People get superpowers, mothers lift cars to save their own children, and there are all these sorts of stories like this. And that actually happens. For me, it was a little bit different. For me, it was just about being able to handle the emotions, all these feelings, and basically there was no way to look upon this situation logically and say, it's going to be all right. There was no way. The brain couldn't do that. Imagine you're 17 years old and you say, okay, now this is the situation. You just lost all these things. You lost your vision and your right hand, and that's it. You just began your life and now it's over. And that's how it looked. But that's the brain talking to you. That's common sense. That's logic. But then something happened within me, and it was not shock. Somehow I let go because I didn't know anything anyway. I wouldn't be able to say anything about the future. So it forced me into this very moment. There was no way I could stay in the past or the future. I couldn't think anymore. I was really pushed up against the wall.
Did this feel like, to you, like an eternity in this period of time? Or was it fast or was it slow? How did this feel?
You could say that an eternity of struggle was compressed into 20 seconds. During that same time, you surrender, because there's no way you can do anything about it. Everything that you've learned until that point is absolutely useless. There is nothing that can help you. So then you surrender and you give up. I had no idea, give up towards what? Or to what? Life. So I didn't give up life, I gave up to life. I let go. And I said, whatever happens will be what it will be. And then I was in this silence. And in that silence, something deep inside myself told me it's going to be all right. Not in words, but somehow I knew that I'm going to have to deal with this later. And right now, I have to stay in this moment. I have to stay aware. I have to stay awake. I have to be right here and be present and handle the situation. So when that happened, I became very calm. You could say that I was extremely pragmatic, considering all the things that had happened to me. Much later on in life, I learned more about this state of consciousness, and that you don't have to go through difficulties to reach it, that you can actually reach this, that we all have it within ourselves, and that it's accessible. It gives you balance, and you definitely learn how to overcome things that you think you can't. I woke up in the hospital bed and I didn't see anything, and I couldn't move also. I was quite stuck there. Because of the injuries, my legs got burnt. There was a lot of things going on, like a skin transplant. It took time. There was a lot of things done to my eyes. They were trying to save as much as they could. But in that moment when I woke up, we can say that I really woke up and I started my journey back at that point. Because before that, yes, I was awake, but it was not as clear. The question was more to stay alive. So in this moment that we're talking about now, I'm waking up in a hospital bed. And this is, I would say, from where I start my journey back to life again. So there I am, 17 years old, and it doesn't look very promising. No hand, just bandages on my left hand, completely blind. I can't move. I could pick my nose, I remember that. So yeah, that was tough. But in the middle of all this struggle, there were some things that kept me going. For example, I kept these ideas of what I would like to do, even if it looked impossible. Some things looked kind of possible. You could maybe find a solution, but other things really looked like, yeah, but that you're not going to do that. That's not for a blind guy. But at the same time, I knew nothing. I had no idea. How do you live your life if you can't see? But what kept me going was basically having dreams. And I had dreams. And I kept them alive. That was a way to stay alive. Even though people thought I was still in another type of dream, in a bubble. And that I didn't really understand my situation. But it was rather the opposite. I was completely aware of my own limitations. But exactly because of that, I was aiming much higher. Because I knew that in order to reach anywhere, I have to aim much higher. So many people, I think they misunderstood me in that. They were trying to push the brakes for me. They were trying to explain, it's not going to be like this and you have to take it easy. Look, it doesn't work like that. You can't go on a snowboard again. You won't be able to play the guitar as good as you did before. You can't drive a car if you're blind, and so on and so forth. Because I was talking about these things. I said, yeah, but I think it should be possible to find a solution, I had nothing to lose anymore. Nobody could take anything away from me anymore. I didn't have anything anyway. And right because of that, I had nothing to lose. That's why I could aim as high as I wanted. I could go for my dreams. But I didn't do that with an imagination that I would succeed. I understood that this is not going to be done just like that. It's a journey, but I have to start. And if I'm going to find out, I have to try it out. And that's exactly what I did with the guitar. So people were like, oh my God, Rickard is going to try the guitar. Oh, he's going to have a breakdown. He's going to realize that he will never be able to play anymore. And I had a few people around me, family members, they were with me. Say, sure, let's try it. So I told my brother, bring some duct tape and something we can attach to my arm. And then my dad brought his guitar and we started attaching the identification card for the hospital. So we attached it. The arm was bleeding and the fingers on my left hand were bleeding. And then I took the guitar and it sounded pretty bad. I didn't get clear notes. It hurt a lot. Normally it hurts when you start playing the guitar, but my fingers and my arms were already burnt and it was like oversensitive. In a sense, I felt the pain, but it was secondary. So my whole focus was on this whole thing to just see what is it going to be like now. Am I going to be able to find something out? And eventually I did. And it was only one chord. I took a C major chord on that guitar that day, and it sounded like a C major. Nothing special if you just hear it, But for me, that was the beginning. I knew that this is going to work. I felt absolutely great. It was totally uplifting. Just one single chord. I knew this is the beginning of something that I'm going to be able to do. So in the middle of all these things, the guitar became that thing with music that I'm going to continue with. So yeah, that's where my journey started. I started playing the guitar again and I continued playing music. Throughout the years, I've played other instruments, started composing music. Well, with music or playing an instrument, you don't have to be the greatest player technically, or I dare to say you don't need to practice every day. I've always been the type of person who, I'm a quick learner. I listen, I pick it up and I get it, But that can also make me lazy. So I've always practiced discipline. That's something that I need to improve. Of course, you need that. And of course, with discipline, you become better. But it's also about the feeling. So music is something that you do, but in the moment, for example, if you perform or you record, you compose music at home, you get these moments where you lose yourself. You're gone. You're not there anymore. So of course in that moment when you're not there anymore, there is no Rickard, there is no hand. It's not a question of if you play with one hand or three hands. It's just music. And that's the magic. That's it. That's where the magic is taking place. Whether it is a performance or you composing music at home or playing for yourself. But I believe that it also happens when you share it with others. And then I don't mean that you get credit after. I mean specifically in that moment, that experience. We come back to the moment, right? So after the performance, you might feel happy, you might feel good, but that's something else. So now we're talking about that experience in that very moment. And music brings you there. It does. You can call it meditation or a state of flow or heart-brain coherence or all these things. That's the magic. And then music is just, you don't do music, you don't play music for a purpose. It just is. And it's the same with you. You are.